I didn't mean to. I apologize. But, all in all, what do I want to rate the game? You know what? Let's actually play the credits, because I do believe that credits should be played. We'll let men and women who worked on this game get their time to shine here. Storyline. The storyline was vague, but a lot of the information that you needed to understand what was going on was there. I do like that they left out certain parts. I didn't realize initially that it was because there was going to be a second part of the game, or a second episode, if you will. I did not realize that this game was episodic. But storyline-wise, it gave you just enough information to creep you the heck out, but it left off just enough information to leave you curious, which was a fantastic thing. The storyline is very bare bones. You know you're trying to rescue Jane, that's all you know. And then, you know, it fills in the pieces as you progress. The issue with that sort of storytelling is that somebody could miss something and have no idea that they missed something, so they could miss out on a huge piece of information in the story and not even be aware of it. All told, it's hard for me to give the story a super high rating because I'm not too up on Thai mythology, so I don't know how creative or unique they got with some of the information. So given my own ignorance on the topic, I'm just gonna have to give the game or give the story a score based off of how interesting I found the information that was presented to me. And personally, I think they did a very good job. I would honestly give the story for the game an 8. I think it was very well done. It was the narrative was crafted in small segments, chunks. It wasn't overly story heavy, but it gave you just enough to make you want to continue on. So I think I would give it an 8 because it was inventive, it was creepy, it was dark, it was confusing, which I think is great for a horror game because confusion makes you want to push forward. Let's see. Graphically, you guys know personally, graphically, I'm not a huge graphics fan. For this being an indie title, graphically, it was really well done. There were a few issues with the lighting, with the reflective surfaces, the lighting just kind of being weird. And there was issues with your light reflecting off of nothing. It would just reflect in the air, which was sort of jarring. The creepy ghost girl, very creepy. Sonam Bojan, thank you very much for the follow. I appreciate that. Welcome to the channel today. But Honest Virtue, thank you very much for the 2-bit cheer. Says, just throwing in my 2 cents. This game was funny and seeing your reactions, and that's the point in horror on stream, right? Absolutely. But yeah, graphically, it looked good. Creepy Ghost Girl was very creepy. I think she could have used for a little bit more detail in her face, since you get to see it up close so often when she kills you. I think that definitely would have been beneficial. But graphically, seemed well done, but not stupendous. So I'd probably give it like maybe a 6.5, 7, just slightly above average, but not, 7.5, 8 level where it's just really nice. So I think 6.5, 7 looked really good. Well, except Jane. I think she's a goner, possibly Mijak. She could be a goner. One of the most key elements in any horror game is sound design. And I think, honestly, that's where this game loses a little bit of points for me. A huge key to horror is keeping the tension level high for the player by either running through a myriad of ambient sounds or just a low foreboding soundtrack, and just keeping the player's ears tuned because you want the tension to remain high. Now, I understand you can burn out on tension, but that's a great way to do it without being heavy-handed. And there are huge sections of this game where you just get to hear this idle hum. And it's not really that freaky if you know that the demon chick thing isn't around. It's really not It doesn't really help with attention, and then there are way too many dead spots in the sound where it's just completely quiet, and it can be a good thing in games if it's used effectively, but I don't think personally that it was used effectively here. All told, as far as sound goes, let's see. Well, another thing that I want to comment on is the Ghost Girl. Once you realize that the only thing that can actually threaten you is the ghost chick, outside of the big giant demon monster thing that we had to contend with, once you realize that she's the only thing that can actually harm you, everything else loses its teeth. It's not scary, it's just an obstacle at that point. And by not introducing... That's what I was talking about with ambient sound, Mars. With not introducing new threats along the game, you get very, very accustomed to her sounds and her alert noise and her presence and that sort of thing. And toward the end of the game, I just grew dull to it. Or, excuse me, not dull. I just grew numb to it. It didn't really startle me. It didn't help build fear or tension in any regard toward the end of the game. I think a few different threats throughout the game could have definitely been beneficial. But having said that, she did a good job of keeping me tense, probably up until about halfway through the game, and that's when the tension started to wear off. But as far as sound goes overall, I honestly don't think that I can give it better than a 5 out of 10. It's just very middle of the road. It doesn't do anything supremely well, but it doesn't do anything poorly. It's just adequate. It gets the job done, but it doesn't shine. Level design, the first few stages, or the first few times that you visit stages, it's really interesting and it's really nerve-wracking to go around each and every corner, and you don't know what you're going to see and what's going to jump out at you, which of course, great, horror game, you want that fear, you want that hesitation, and you want to design your levels in a way that you get the player freaked out by making them think you might do something. And in the level design, again, this is where the game sort of falters for me. They don't use enough opportunities to just surprise you with the level. Like, you go to open a door and it slams shut in front of you. Things like that. Yes, they're jump scares, yes, they're kind of cheesy, but if used sparingly, they can be effective to help keep that level of tension high. And later in the game, the levels just get really confusing because you've traveled through the same level 2 or 3 times. And this door that you couldn't open before, you can now, but you might have overlooked it because you couldn't open it before. Or, this room that you were already in, oh, hey, now I can move this object that I couldn't move before. There's just too much repetition for my personal liking. But the levels themselves, they were presented well, they were creepy. They did definitely instill a sense of atmosphere. I think a little bit more detail to the walls and the surroundings definitely would have benefited the game. But all told, I was thoroughly impressed by the presentation. So, if I had to give it a score out of 10, I don't think I ever saw roaches crawl across the walls. You guys may not have been able to see those roaches up there. But I don't think I ever saw that in the game. All told, I'd give it a 6.5, 7. Nothing too astounding. You know what? I'm being too generous. 6 to a 6.5. It's just above average. It's okay, but it's not middling, if that makes any sense. Gameplay, I think gameplay is where this game really nails it, because it's the type of game... They were on the floor mostly, Fro, the roaches? Okay. You must have missed them. It's entirely possible, yeah. But I will say, I think that the gameplay is where this game definitely nails it, in that you are defenseless, but you're not incapable. You can flee the threat, you can hide from the threat, you can use the environment to, provide cover from the threat. And the fact that she is not an insta one-hit kill every single time makes you actively want to avoid her when she sees you, and that helps build tension as you're trying to run from her, because then you lose sight of her, and when you lose sight of her, all you have to go off of is her creepy clicking sounds, and the sounds of her feet scuffling, and that definitely adds a lot to the tension in the game. I think that they did that very well. I would have liked to have seen, again, a little bit more variety in how the enemies present themselves and that sort of thing. I think that could definitely add a new dimension to the gameplay. But no issues there. It's very basic. It doesn't stray too far from that formulaic approach. But it does it very well. I would honestly say I would give it the highest rating out of anything so far. I'd have to give that an 8. It nailed that approach. The forcing you to be slow even when running, while it frustrates me, it helps build tension, and that's what your end goal should be in horror, is trying everything should add to the tension building experience. So I think that they did that very well. I would have to give that an 8. We covered story, graphics, gameplay, sound, level design. I guess since this is a horror game, we're going to tack on an extra category. Since this is a horror game, we are going to tack on the freakiness factor. As a horror title, the game does some things very well, but by the end of the game, I was honestly... until we got to the cabin and everything was completely different, I wasn't scared by the ghost girl anymore. I wasn't scared by her little watcher guys. When lights flickered and that whole sort of thing, it was like, They never broke their own formula throughout the game. So the fear and tension, it nosedives about midway through the game, because you realize that the game isn't going to present you with anything new. Now, I say that, and at the very end of the game, it definitely presented you with something new in playing through that little Jane segment there. But if I had to rate it from, like, Saturday morning kids cartoon to what's the scariest thing I've ever seen? I don't know. There's not a universal metric for the scariest thing in the world. But if I had to rate it from, like extremely scary to not scary at all, I'd say it's slightly below your average horror flick, because video games being interactive, you have to be able to engage your player, and since you're not engaging your player in any new or interesting ways toward the middle and latter half of the game, it just sort of dwindles that tension down, and I think that mars the experience. Now, having said all of that, since there is apparently going to be a second chapter, this could all change. It could be building up to something new. But honestly, overall, if I had to score the game, given everything, I'm going to force myself to not be generous, and I'm going to say the game earns a 7. It earns a hard 7. I would like to give it a 7.5, but I think that's just giving it too much credit. The game is an above-average game overall. The horror elements are somewhat lacking, the sound is somewhat lacking, but the gameplay and presentation help bring it back up.